All right, everybody, welcome to part two of our screencast presentation for Wednesday's class. And we are going to start by conceptualizing novelty as information gradients. Remember, novelty is not just things that are new and different, but they're new and different in a way that provides you information. So if they have nothing to do with anything you've ever experienced before, it's not useful novelty. Novelty we mean as really new information, novel information. And it's stuff you can use, so it helps you process information, okay? You go into a modern art exhibit, if you don't understand modern art at all, you might not enjoy it at all because you don't have enough information to process that novelty, and so we wouldn't really call it novelty in a sense, or that modern art is information. We'd call it confusing because you don't have enough information to understand it. All right, so here we go. We're talking about coevolution, right? This is what we talked about last time, and we talked about how it'd be concentration and attraction, or dispersion and branching. But and we've gone over that stuff. But I want to emphasize a species. I'm going to talk about today. Maybe you could talk about how a species evolves. For example, humans being particularly interesting, but there's others too. I noted a word or a meaning. I'll briefly note that today, how you could use this sort of diagrammatic form to do that, about how that word is a more efficient way of processing information, how it might have emerged because of that. It's found a niche in the linguistic ecological landscape, as it were. I think that might be the right way of putting it. Yeah, we talked about that stuff. A blog. I'll talk about maybe a fan blog of a soccer team is what I had in mind here, because the Rafters, the pro team in town, pro soccer team in town, has a fan blog. Product, company, politician, policy, a job position. I don't think I noted that before, but we're going to talk about that today, the evolution of a couple of different job positions. All that, I noticed a person. I'll put myself there just to get us thinking about how it might work. Okay, so, we're looking for attraction to shared information. That's what you're looking for. What was really popular, or what seemed to work, and how did it fit in a new way? How was it new, but it was also fitting? And how did it maybe draw from detritus? I should try and remember to bring detritus here as we proceed. Okay, here we go. The evolution of information orders. Let's imagine things swirling around with different information in them. That could be a kind of, these could be kinds of experiences that people have contact with, and that might inform their order of information that they're dealing with. So these are related experiences here, intersecting with the order of information that they're dealing with. And let's say we're talking about the Rafters, the soccer team in Shreveport. At first, there may be patterns noted by fans, really good players, for example, or good teams in the league, or good games, or what was interesting about that last game. And they're talking about that, and they're noting it to themselves and to each other, drawn in by the shared information into that green space, into the shared information of having an interest in the Rafters, having seen the games. They might then heighten the visibility of those patterns. Imagine that second area sort of bumping up, right? That's popping up, so that becomes more visible. And imagine that the third one hasn't even existed yet, right? So this might be how it starts. Fans publish the patterns in some ways. They might circulate email, so they might put out a little, little news order, or they might, newsletter. Who does that anymore? Publish a blog on it, right? They might start a blog. Another group of fans or other people coming in from the outside, maybe with certain related experiences that give them experience in publishing professional publications, could say, hey, we're gonna make a magazine. There's a lot of interest in this. Let's put out a monthly magazine on the rafters. And they're helped by perhaps those other things that are at the lower levels. You can waltz right in and produce your publication without there having been a blog, if you think there's enough patterns noted by fans, right, that they'll be interested in your elevated sort of your more meaningful way of circulating the patterns, of distributing those patterns. It'll resonate with them, and they'll think they can do stuff with them. Hey, I'm also a fan of this other team or this other sport. That resonates with that. That's why I'm interested in it. Or I know that person from because they live in my neighborhood, something like that, and that's why they're interested in it. You don't necessarily need the blog to come in between, but that's sort of how it might work. Now, it might cause a change in how professional sports are publicized. If that news magazine is particularly successful, if they're trying something innovative, if they're noting something that's different. So that could be a punctuated equilibrium. If there's any sort of really novel idea that's come up with, maybe through the related experiences, right? It's always sort of through the outer environment, or from things falling apart and you forgetting things and putting things together new, a different way. Those are the two different ways of coming up with creativity and novelty, right? Either from new combinations of things that already exist, or from things sort of falling apart and you putting them back together again sort of wrongly. So it could occur if the patterns that are published are meaningful. In terms of frequency, stability, and impact, as we've talked about before, that is, if the patterns published, the patterns that get sort of distilled, if they're things that are very stable, that are very frequently perceived, and if they're impactful, that is, if they relate to other things, or if they are. I'm sorry. So what's happening here is if they're meaningful patterns, it'll get picked up by the next level or seen worthy as being published on the next level. Hey, that's a really useful thing. That's a really worthy, thing to note. Hey, that guy scored 57 goals in 5 games. Holy crap! We gotta publish this. We gotta get this out. We'll even put it at that level. We'll do something concrete. Okay, so the next thing that might happen is that the other way a punctuated equilibrium could occur is from the inside out. If suddenly, say, the news magazine is so effective in getting out the patterns that it allows the fans and so on to resonate with their other experiences more effectively. So the patterns are published meaningfully in terms of frequency, stability, and impact. So if they're working outward, right, if they're really well published, well put together, it makes it to the blog or blogs, the blogosphere. It makes it to the people that are talking about it at the bars and so on, and in social life, and that causes people to relate it to the blue and red rings on the outside. Okay, I know this. I got one more hard slide here, and I hope this. This is theoretical, of course, as this. Most of this course is, but I hope you're able to get it. Here's another take on it: the emergence of complementary orders. Complementarity was a term I played with for a while about coining it and publishing on it. It's useful, but we'll get to that with criticality, I think, later. Critical points of order. Anyway, this is the emergence of complementary orders. You have that, and maybe things get going in the blogosphere and they become more and more meaningfully published, right? They get more and more elevated. And that might become something that becomes a permanent publication and even becomes a professional publication. But it started out as a blog, right? You got me? So new orders grow due to their relationships with other orders, with other experiences, other parts of the system. And that blog may have developed because of the way it resonated with other experiences, other parts of that order. So I'm going to be talking about blogs, but I'll be talking about dogs too. I'll be talking about me, and I'll be talking about a word as well, where it's doing well because of the way it intersected with other experiences. And that helps another system do so well, it becomes elevated too. So it might interact with those two big kinds of experiences, whatever it is, high school soccer and say, you know, professional soccer, or pro sports in Shreveport and your entertainment dollar or something like that. And that becomes, you know, its own system that writes on that. Hey, that's a good idea. Let's write on that. Let's publish on that. But things can die off without people attending to them, right? Without people perceiving them as things that are worthy of frequency, of attending to them frequently, if they're unsure what they are or how they relate to their other experiences. Frequency, stability, and impact are handy variables, guys. I encourage you to think about them as sort of what makes anything grow. And but the other thing that makes them grow is their position and their ability to create novel expressions of shared information. And that's the criticality that we're about to talk about, where it's a mix of stability and newness. Okay? A mix of stability and newness. All right, here's some wordiness for us before I get to one more visual slide. Okay, self-organization occurs and can be maintained at points of criticality. There is more life at the edge of order and chaos, between orders and boundaries. So the action happens between those things. It's the regular fans reading the blogs. It's the publishers reading the blogs is what I'm getting at. Systems can't be rigidly controlled. You have to let them interact. So centralized communist systems didn't work. They were too overly planned by and large. Nor did laissez-faire capitalism work. They can't be anarchy. Okay, you've got to have some order. It doesn't work if they're anarchic. So laissez-faire economies being an example. You must have a balance. Why? Well, you need that growth of information. We're about finding new novelty. If everything is planned for you, there's no novelty. And if everything is novel, there's no order. There's no information. There's no shared information, right? We need both of those things. All right, let's get another visual slide here. This is the importance of circulation for the critical balance of attraction and dissipation. So the problem with communist economies is that they didn't allow enough circulation and randomness. The problem with laissez-faire economies was that they allowed too much. So you've got to have a balance, is the idea. Of course, this isn't just me. Of course, there's complexity economists who deal with this concept. Dante Suarez was a guy at Trinity University in San Antonio, or college. Anyway, the importance of circulation for the critical balance of attraction and dissipation. Yeah, you need things to circulate. Like, I should have made that blue, I guess, because that should be blue water you're thinking of there. Or really, well, I guess pond water is pretty green and brackish, so that's actually what I mean. Because it's like a pond. Okay, so you've got decay through entropy falling into the pond. Dead animals falling in there and rotting, and maybe in the mud or whatever, fish. And that makes up detritus, right? Leaves falling into the pond, etc. Muddy stuff. muddy, sort of smelly stuff. My dad has a little pond. Once you go into it and scoop up the mud, you step into the mud when you're swimming, it's smelly. It's rotting, it's decaying, and that's nutritious, actually. Certain enzymes, certain organisms are attracted to that detritus. It's nutritious for them. It serves a purpose for them. And so they get new combinations there. They get novelty. They get fresh ingredients, as it were. And that leads to their growth and their order. Okay? Which, of course, decays eventually and falls back into the pond, right? So you have your tree and its leaves falling into the pond. So this is the cycle of life and death, of growth and decay, that creates possibilities for further growth. Yes, you guys can't wait until your old professors retire and move on so that you can occupy our positions and say basically the same thing. No, you won't be saying the same thing. You'll be saying different things because you're going through life in a slightly different environment. Ain't it great? All right, let's plow ahead. How might you talk about... Oh, I shouldn't. I can't plow ahead, guys. I got to give you a break. I'm going to talk about the evolution of dogs here in terms of shared information and new gradients that help information processing efficiency. I will talk about that. Or the evolution of a person in the same terms. I will talk about that. Gee, if you've made it to this point in the quiz and in the screencast, these would be good questions for the quiz, right? Where did he leave off? Where did he leave off? As I promised, I wouldn't take too much longer. Okay, it's 19 minutes. I can stop there. Guys, thanks for listening. I'll see you Wednesday.